Alright, Death Cube, you got this. Come on, buddy. You got this. Or not. Alright, Worm, you're my boy. You got this. Yeah. So in today's topic, what we want to talk about are companions. We want to talk about two things in particular: what makes a companion effective and what makes how we choose a companion. Because a lot of this really comes down to personal choice, and I believe our personal choices for companions can really be boiled down to three questions. So first, let's go ahead and take a look at Kubrows. Now, my belief, and again, a lot of this is within the realm of my opinion, and we have to form our own opinions on these things within the game, because it's not always just about this is 100% more effective than that, and therefore in this game where everything is a bullet sponge, you have to use the thing that is most effective. No, Warframe offers us choice. So, let's go ahead and look at our choices. I'll break them down by what they offer, and then, of course, I will give some of my opinion on this. Actually, I'll just start with some of my opinion on this. I believe that two Kubrows are the most effective: the Helios Kubrow and the Sahasa Kubrow. Now, there is also the Raksa Kubrow, which kind of adds a bit more player survivability, but there's a reason why I don't feel like this Kubrow is as effective as the other two, and I will get to that in just a brief moment. So, starting with the Helios Kubrow, it has Hunt and Stalk. This is basically the stealth Kubrow that I haven't been able to remember for this entire episode. The Helios Kubrow is, well, it's a better shade, honestly, because Stalk gives you a lot more room to be cloaked with, and I believe Stalk is 25 meters, where Shade was only, 24 meters, where Shade is only, I believe 13 meters. We'll look that up in the next segment before I start talking about Sentinels as companions. So the next Kubrow is the Raksa. It has the Protect mod, which is basically like Guardian from Sentinels, where it cloaks the player in a shield, or it restores the player's shield once the shield is lost, once every so often. And then you also have Howl, which is basically like a Kubrow variation of Necros's Terrify. It's not bad, it's just there are things we're going to analyze these companions under where I find that some of these things, personally, to me, in my decision-making, falls short. The Sahasa Kubrow offers us Dig and Ferocity, and again, I do believe that this is one of the better of the 5 available Kubrow types. The Sunika Kubrow offers us Savagery, allowing the Sunika Kubrow to use finisher attacks on enemies, and Unleashed allows Sunika Kubrows to knock down VIP targets. Basically, this is one of the Kubrows you'll often see on capture missions, which is still a great option to have a specific Kubrow for specific mission types, so that you can always rely on this Kubrow, even if you can't, even if you don't feel like this Kubrow is always the most reliable in every situation. It does give them a niche, which is awesome. And then finally we have the Chesa Kubrow, which is was kind of meant to be the carrier Kubrow, and we'll start here with why I feel this Kubrow falls short. And it's a bit obvious, and it's been talked about by others within the community. It's because in retrieving items, the Kubrow is so busy with retrieving items, it's not serving multiple purposes, like Carrier can, where Carrier, or now many Sentinels, can be shooting and is just picking up items by sucking them up, whereas the retrieve option is limited, where it has to bring the items back to you. Now, I do personally think that Kubrows and Kavats now that all Sentinels have a vacuum function, Kubrows and Kavats should have a kind of a pickup function, but maybe it should be as simple as they walk up to items and pick them up, and therefore they're picked up, period, the end. Maybe the Kubrows and the Kavats eat them and then they throw them up on our ship. That actually doesn't sound good. Anyway, so let's, the other thing is neutralize, which, no, that's not one of the ones that's shared between a couple of the Kubrows. This one basically is like a Loki disarm, but it's a singular target. Let's go ahead and take a look at how effective this mod is. So basically it doesn't really have any information for us on the wiki, but one of the things I do want to bring up, one of the things that why Carrier has been such an easy choice for a lot of players, and I'll make it clear, Carrier is not my choice. For those who haven't watched me here, I'm Scott from Ramble Entertainment. Hey, how's it going? Why Carrier has... I prefer Worm, personally, or the Adarza Kavat. But Carrier has been an easy choice because of consistency. And as we kind of saw with the earlier Sentinels, consistency was not... Let's go ahead and remove this graphic until we need it again. Consistency is not within all Sentinel precepts. Carrier was vacuum within. Carrier was always picking up items, and yet still with his new precept allowing Carrier to carry more ammo for the player's weapons, he is constantly providing an ammo benefit, a constant benefit, whereas things like Death Ray or Worm's, Knockdown, I should really know that name. I use Worm, but I don't even use his precept anymore. These things have a cooldown, and they are not a constant benefit, and that is very important within our choices with our companions, because we do need constant benefit to us, otherwise that companion is falling short where other companions do not. So, let's go ahead and pull the Kubrow's graphic back up. So as we were saying, we need a reliable benefit to our companions, otherwise they're just falling short. Neutralize, probably, even though it doesn't list it on the Wikia, has a cooldown where it's not consistently neutralizing enemies. It's not neutralizing their ability to fire at us. If it was more constant, even neutralizes an enemy once every 5 seconds, that would be a lot more consistent instead of what is likely an enemy once every 30 seconds. It's just not consistent enough, especially when you can equip yourself with Loki if you want to neutralize enemies, and neutralize all firearms within 50 meters. It's just not a constant benefit. And one of the other factors is it's not as measurable as within a modern-day Warframe. Warframe is really starting to empower players even more than when it used to, when a lot of these Kubrows were even coming out, although technically the Chessa was newer. And that's also important, that it's time that maybe these Kubrows and some other Sentinels start to see reworks too, where they have more benefits and more consistent benefits. So let's look at the Sunika. This is the basically the Assault Kubrow. Again, it has a great niche, but outside of just Assault, it really doesn't offer many more benefits, where with a Sentinel, per se, you have the opportunity to be shooting, to be restoring your shield, and even healing yourself, all within one package. So it is attacking, and to be clear, Kubrows do have a lot more attack power. Granted, sometimes that is inconsistent due to AI problems, which is something else that has been brought up on dev streams, but that is important. Again, consistency, and if the AI keeps them from being consistent in their attacking, or their support of the player, or their disabling of enemies within the area, then it's easy to make other choices that are consistent. So the Sahasa Kubrow, I do think, is one of the more consistent Kubrow choices. One of the big reasons, and this one shares the ferocity, or no, it doesn't. It just allows it to do finisher damage. Interesting. I didn't know. But basically, finisher attacks, it kind of pins a target and then does the finisher damage, which is awesome as well. And it digs. Finisher damage is awesome, and the digging is awesome too. It digs once every 30 seconds, basically, as long as you've left a 30-meter area from where it last dug. I think that 30-meter area is a bit kind of too large. Again, taking away from the consistency of the ability. However, if you are aware of what your companion can bring to the table, you can just keep rotating between rooms, potentially, although on a defense or a mobile defense, that might become problematic. Still, nonetheless, Dig can offer a lot of energy, health, a lot of ammo, things that the player simply needs on the go, and that is great, and I do think that the Sahasa is a decent choice when it comes to choosing a Kubrow. Now, I personally used a Roxa for a while. And I'll get to this a lot more when it comes to talking about Sentinels and the differences between choosing a Kavat or a Kubrow and choosing a Sentinel. But I've always, since I kind of even started playing the game, I've always liked the option to restore the shield. Now, I think when it comes to the armor argument, that this is one of the neglected things where a Sentinel can restore your shield to full on a pretty consistent basis. And the Roxa offers us this opportunity too, but once again, Sentinels offer us that and more, and in a variety of packages. All Sentinels have the opportunity to give us Guardian, and that's pretty powerful. When you have Sentinels that can do different things, operate at different ranges, 15, even 30 meters, and adding damage to the enemies you're already fighting, and offer us more through mods like Meta Ray, it's hard to want to choose the Roxa over the Sentinels. However, it is worth noting that Kubrows and Kavats, of course, go down, whereas a Sentinel just dies and regens once per mission. Now, we'll get to more of that when we talk about the comparisons between survivability of these Kavats and Kubrows and Sentinels. So, the last Kubrow that I want to talk about before I make some comments about Kavats, since there's only two of them right now, is the Helios Kubrow, and I think that this is a wonderful choice if stealth was a bit more consistent within the game. I do think if you are a Naramon user using Shadow Step, that the Helios gives you some great options because it has powerful attacks and it cloaks, and I believe it cloaks with you. I should have done the testing before recording this, but admittedly, I am a bit behind this week, and I'm recording the day before this posts. Anyway, so I believe the Helios does cloak with you, even if it's not through its own devices, through stock. And so if you're using Shadow Step, you're going to consistently cloak your Kubrow, and then if you unfortunately run out of Shadow Step, your Kubrow might have the opportunity to make up for your survivability through cloaking where you are not in your melee. And that's cool, and I think that cloaking has a lot more opportunities in this game than it's often given. However, as far as survivability goes, a lot of times I personally feel that Sentinels offer us more survivability by comparison to most Kubrows. Now, before we get into survivability comparisons and the questions we should be asking ourselves when we choose our companions, who will come with us, what missions they'll cover with us, what combinations they have with frames and different weapons, let's talk about the 2 Kavats and the 7 Sentinels, not including primes. And basically, there are 2 Kavats, and 7 Sentinels, 9 Sentinels if you include the primes, and really, when it comes to Sentinels, the largest differences between them are survivability and their weapon that they come with. Yes, there are precepts, however, to be honest, I feel like most of the precepts outside of carriers just kind of need to be looked at. Just like I displayed at the beginning of the episode, they just don't provide the consistency, and even if they are consistent, they just aren't providing you with a lot of benefit. So the two Kavats are the Smita and the Darza. We've talked about these before, plenty of others have talked about them before, but let's get them out of the way real quick. So the Adarza offers you a 60% critical chance increase to yourself and all your teammates within a 25-meter radius for 10 seconds. Now, 10 seconds isn't a lot, but every 20, it has a 20-second cooldown, so you can have it activated twice per minute. And for a lot of weapons, that's a huge amount of damage, and even for frames that benefit from critical damage, that's huge too. Mesa, Valkyr, Excalibur, Wukong can all be pushed into red crit damage. That's big. Now, you also have the Smita Kavat, which offers a slew of, I would say all of the things it does are beneficial, the least of which are an instant reload and probably the overshield. The overshield is just kind of, as far as overshields go, it's not a lot. Granted, it's still a great benefit to have more shielding to buffer some of those larger hits, but all the same, it's just kind of like, well, okay, moving on. And so the Sentinels, again, I feel like a lot of their difference makers really come down to their weapons. Shade has a great precept, Carrier has a great precept, and Jin are basically 3 of the most effective precepts of the 7 Sentinels, in my opinion, and I'll go over them real quickly before we get into survivability comparisons and when and where we should pick our companions. So I was actually wrong. There are 10 Sentinels, including Prisma Shade. Whoops. And so let's go ahead and take a look at all of the different Sentinels real quick and their precepts and have a bit of a discussion over them. Now, Carrier, once again, because it has one of the newest precepts, has a very consistent and very effective precept. Ammo Case carries 25% plus 25% ammo capacity for equipped weapons and converts ammo pickups into ammo for the weapon you have equipped after a short delay. Even with a 3-second delay, that's huge, especially when there are a number of weapons and builds for weapons that are just strictly ammo inefficient. You take the Ignis in with any kind of additional speed and you're going to burn through your ammo, but taking Carrier along with the Ignis, you're going to disperse your damage massively across multiple enemies at the same time while keeping it more consistent without having to use ammo restores. Again, consistency is key, and I really want to see with a lot of these Sentinel precepts a lot more consistency, a lot more benefits across the board to the player. So when we look at Death Cube is one of those that where it's just like it completely lacks consistency. Death Cube utilizes Vaporize, and it only does 900 damage to an enemy that is 4 meters away, and it has a 30-second cooldown. So 900 damage isn't a lot, especially against a number of enemies that have I just lost it. There's 2 types of armor. There's alloy, and then there's... It was right there in my head, and... Ferrite. There we go. Ferrite reduces the amount of damage taken from radiation damage, so it just lacks consistency. In fact, there's a couple of different types of mitigations to radiation, I believe. A type of flesh mitigates its damage too, and that's important because without that, you're reducing consistency. Where again, if we look at Carrier, one of the most chosen Sentinels in the game, one of the most likely reasons is because of his consistency in his precept. So let's go ahead and move this forward. Now, to be fair to my opener, Durja actually has two precepts. Not calculated shot. Each Sentinel has a mod that allows them to attack and increase their attack range. Durja has one of the largest attack ranges, I think the largest attack range of all of the Sentinels, and a very high health count. So if you are of the mindset that health helps to keep your Sentinel alive, Durja is, in my opinion, a great choice for Sentinel, as well as Carrier. Carrier's a great choice, but we'll get to survivability of Sentinels after this. So Durja has Electro Pulse and Arc Coil. I was kind of poking fun at Arc Coil earlier, where it zaps multiple enemies but does very little damage, and basically has a small chance to stun, but just does very little damage, whereas Electro Pulse does stun a single enemy, a single target. Yep. And the issue with that is, if you want to stun targets, there are plenty of Warframes that have stuns that stun tons of enemies within range. And again, it's just like the consistency on these abilities just falls short. There is very little benefit comparatively when you look at Carrier, or even a Smita Kavat, or an Adarza Kavat. These are, in my mind, some of the best options, but I do think that Jin, or Dijin, depending on how you want to pronounce it, Durja and Worm are also great choices for Sentinels, and we'll get to why they are also great choices after we're done reviewing abilities. So Jin comes with Fatal Attraction, and arguably this is probably one of the more effective precepts because of its effective range, reaching a lot more enemies, reaching a lot of your Warframe ranges, your Warframe ability ranges, or your weapon ranges, and basically it has the chance to kill or affect a lot of enemies within that large range, and that is good. And it also disables enemies that are within that affected range. Now, there is still a large cooldown, so you lose that consistency in that large cooldown, and that's important because, again, when you look at these things that are effective, the Smita is constantly giving you a benefit. The Carrier is giving you a constant benefit. The Adarza Kavat is giving you a consistent benefit once every 30 seconds and to all teammates. Very important factors when we think about our companions and potentially, DE, if you happen to watch this, the future of our companions. So let's wrap up Sentinels and then we can start talking about survivability. So Sentinels basically wrap up with Worm, and I actually didn't open Shade, so let's go ahead and open Shade real quick. And Shade, as you know, has the precept of cloaking. However, again, when we look at Shade compared to the, what was it, Sunika? I already forgot. Oh no, it was the Helios. Damn, I think I got it. So when you look at Shade, don't look at the ads. When you look at Shade comparatively to the Helios, the effective range is considerably smaller than I even commented on earlier in this video. I thought it was 13 meters. It's actually 10. When an enemy is within 10 meters, you get cloaked. 10 meters isn't a lot to function within, and 24 meters is a lot more generous. And so let's look at our last companion, Worm, my personal buddy. Worm Prime utilizes crowd dispersion, and his crowd dispersion knocks down a bunch of enemies within a 10 meter range, not a lot of range, on a 15-second cooldown. Again, reducing the consistency, small effect area, not a big benefit. Woo! Knocked some dudes down! Yeah! Aw, shit, they're up again. Okay, so I'm recording this tonight. I'll be posting this because I completely missed Helios. Didn't even occur to me that I missed Helios, but Helios is great for utility, a Sentinel that does utility, and can obviously do healing and keeping a player alive, so apply him where I say things like keeps a Sentinel, can go both ways, basically, at the end of this video, because I do think that Helios lacks some survivability compared to Warframe, Jin, Durja, even Prisma Shade, obviously Carrier Prime, just lacks some survivability, dies a lot easier, even once you have all 3 survivability mods maxed, and on Helios, just still can go down a bit easier to damage, area of effect damage. But he has that incredibly effective mod of Investigator, where he can scan in codex entries and of course accumulate synthesis points if you haven't gotten your codex completed or maybe are missing a faction. Either way, very utilitarian. Now, with all of these differences in mind between each individual Sentinel, each Kavat, each Kubrow, let's actually start to look at them as a whole, as Kubrows, Kavats, and Sentinels. So let's go ahead and pull up this arbitrary graph. It's a bit arbitrary, but I think it is a decent representation, arguably, of where survivability is between Sentinels versus companions, being Kavats and Kubrows. Now, again, a lot of this is arguable, and of course, this is also up to each individual person to make choices for themselves. I'm sure some who lean more towards Kavats and Kubrows will likely say that no, the end of that graph should actually be higher, and maybe before the index should be more aligned with Sentinels, and then after the index should be over Sentinels. Again, it's up to each individual person, but let's take a look at what my take on this seems like. So, max survival mods for max survival and companion mods, basically your Kubrows and Kavats are going, when you get mods for them fresh, and you're also working on your survivability mods, you basically stay pretty close to where Sentinels are in the beginning. Sentinels climb on a steady interval per every improvement, every fusion energy, and every endo input into their survivability mods, whether that's vitality, armor, or shields. They just climb at a steady rate. The reason that the Kavats and Kubrows have an exponential climb is due to the fact that they have link health, link shields, and link armor. This is a percentage of your Warframe's health, shield, and armor. However, as the game continues to grow, players do upgrade their survivability mods, but once they hit around the high mid game or even the mid game, they start to sacrifice some of these survivability mods. Start taking away shields, start taking away your armor mods, start taking away health mods even. And a lot of Warframes that have large energy pools could sacrifice all survivability mods except for quick thinking to gain double benefit from flow or primed flow. And when that happens, you lose a lot of your survivability in the Kavats and Kubrows. So you sink to right about here where, again, this is in my mind, where Sentinels, once they achieve their max survivability mods, they don't have to rely on making sure that the Warframe has survivability equipped to them. However, with the index and its mods that it dropped, it came with a meta pet kit, which gave, in my mind, Sentinels, no, not Sentinels, Kubrows and Kavats, it's late when I'm recording this, Kubrows and Kavats, a lot more survivability in my mind. So let's go over all the different survivability. So we already talked about the links between Kubrows and Kavats, and I do think with some of the, with the new survivability mod, Meta Pet Kit, You can sacrifice some of your Link health, probably not Link health, probably Link shields first, then maybe Link armor depending on the frame you're bringing with the Kavat, and we'll get to decision making after this, and then potentially sacrifice health if you really feel comfortable with your Kubrow or Kavat. Now, as I mentioned, Sentinels have their Vitality, Shield, and Armor mods that just don't rely on the Warframe, and both have accelerated deflection mods that allow them to charge their shield faster if you choose to rely on shields for survivability. And as I mentioned, Meta Pet Kit is what allows us to get to this higher... I can do this! Yeah! No, I can't do it. I can't do it. So, anyway, at the highest end of the graph, that was so much easier. At the highest end of the graph, I basically denote where your Kubrows and Kavats can gain a lot more survivability. Again, some might even place this above Sentinels. So, then you have a lot of your later stage survivability methods for Kubrows and Kavats through Loyal Companion. This basically gives you the opportunity of, I believe it's 38 seconds of bleed out timer. And as I say to new members of our clan who join us on raids, always focus on controlling the situation around a downed player first before you get them up. So this bleed out link affords you a much longer opportunity to control the situation around the downed pet, and then once the situation is under control, get them up. And of course, as we pointed out, Meta Pet Kit also, or I didn't point this out yet, I'm going to point it out now, Meta Pet Kit also improves bleed out time. So this is a phenomenal combination that can really improve the late stages of your cat or dog's, space cat or dog's, survivability. And then we talked about Loyal Companion and Pack Leader. This makes a cat or dog, a Kubrow or a Kavat, a lot more, gives them a lot more utility for the player who wants to use a melee build, use Valkyrie, use Excalibur, Wukong, even Atlas. It gives them a lot more viability for survival. Now, where I start to feel like the large differences are between the two is what utility the Sentinels and the Kubrows or Kavats are bringing to the table. In my mind, even though Sentinels probably are a bit less survivable, they bring a lot more survivability to frames like Nova in the background. So they bring Shield Charger, which recently just released with the Index, Meta Ray, and Guardian. So let's go ahead and take a look at decision making.